Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Leadership Series webinar on circular economy, #Generation Restoration for World Environment Day. Just a technical check before we start. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Thank you. We have a stellar cast for this topic, but before we commence, may I acknowledge the land in which I reside, the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. I pay respect to the elders, both past and present, and since this is Reconciliation Week, I extend a warm welcome to any Aboriginal persons present here today. I'm Brendan O'Keefe, committee member of the ASCI New South Wales chapter, and joining me from the committee all the way from India, it's my pleasure to introduce our New South Wales Secretary, Arushi Agarwal. Welcome, Arushi.
Thanks, Brendan. Hey, everybody.
It's great to have you with us, albeit so far away, and we hope you're keeping safe.
Thanks, Brendan.
Today, we have two keynotes to really drive the topic of circular economy with respect to your supply chains. Firstly, may I introduce Janet Salem, who will set the scene for you. Janet has over 13 years of experience working in circular economy and sustainability at the United Nations. Janet is passionate about developing sustainability strategies that capture market opportunities. She is committed to shared value solutions that reduce resource use, waste, carbon emissions, whilst increasing economic growth, jobs, and revenue for businesses and governments alike. Janet Salem has worked on circular economy, low carbon development, and innovation at the United Nations for over 15 years. Currently, Janet manages projects on technology and circular economy innovation at the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. She is also the global keynote for our annual conference, Supply Chain Vision in the Decade for Action in Western Sydney on the dates of 28th to 30th of July. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you, Brendan. Welcome, Janet. Next up, we have an Australian take on the circular economy, including programs available to your business so that you can become part of #Generation Restoration. Dr. Nicole Garofano is head of circular economy development at Planet Ark. She is an experienced program, projects, and business manager in the NGO, private, and academic sectors. At the Australian Circular Economy Hub, or ACE, it ensures that the relevance and the value for Australians' transition to the circular economy. We all welcome you here, Nicole. Just as a side note, there will be a question times at the end, but please do not hesitate to post questions in the Q&A throughout the presentation so that we can address them immediately after Nicole's keynote. Further discussion will take place with Nicole in the closed LinkedIn group for members, where the recorded webinar will also be available for the playback. Also, if you're not a member, join ASCI for around $275 per annum, a tax-deductible and career-enhancing move, well worth the investment. So guys, without any further ado, I'll hand over the mic to Janet to begin today's presentation. Janet.
Okay, thank you. An advance notice, I am losing my voice today, but let's see if we can get through this one. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much, Arushi and Brendan and Monique for inviting me. So what I want to talk about is digital innovation for the circular economy. All right. Oh, this is going to be a ride. Okay, so why are we interested in circular economy in Asia and Pacific? Well, first of all, it's because we are using a lot of natural resources. That means that we're extracting them from the earth, either through mining or forestry, fishery, or agriculture. So in this infographic, what you can see is all the resources extracted in the world, which adds up to about 81 billion tonnes per year. And in Asia and the Pacific, which is the area I focus on, we're using over 2/3 of those resources. And that's not only for exports, that's also for our own consumption as we're building infrastructure, etc. Now, what's interesting is that we're generating 3 times less economic value out of those resources. So that's the resource efficiency. So in Asia, for every kilogram of resources we take out of the earth, we generate about 33 cents of economic value. Whereas in the rest of the world, they're generating about $1 of value. So we've got a long way to go to make the most of what we take out of the earth. Now, that was a per country basis, but I wanted to also show the footprints on a per capita basis so that we can sort of equalize in terms of population. So if we look at the final amount of resource use that's needed for our consumption, it's about 40 tonnes per year in Australia. So we're up on the upper end of our region. But it's quite different between countries. So you can see in Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Myanmar, they're using quite a lot less. And in Singapore, which is highly urbanized, a lot more. They're using 76 tonnes per capita per year. So per day, I just want you to imagine that's like going out to your garden and digging up about 100 kilos per person in Australia. That's the amount of resources we're taking out of the environment. And it's actually growing rapidly. So if we just look at China over here, you can see the growth from 2000 to 2015. Okay, and so a lot of this is because we're following a linear economy model. If we look at a supply chain and simplify it, we're taking resources from the earth. Now they can be either renewable ones or finite ones, non-renewable ones, like fossil fuels or metals or minerals. From there, we make parts or materials. Then we make products, and then they pass through a service provider like a retailer before coming to the user. And all along the way, we're producing waste and emissions, particularly at the final user level. And that leads to impacts at the point of extraction, from agriculture and mining, etc. Carbon emissions along the supply chain, other types of emissions to air and water, and finally waste to landfill. Now, I've put that linear economy on its side next to a Sankey diagram showing the actual amounts. This is for the EU. So you can see up here, this is where the materials are extracted from the environment and they become processed materials. And then some of them are used for energy, some of them are used for materials. Some of them go into building stock, like buildings, roads, etc., filling up our cupboards. But the majority of things end up going to waste in either emissions to air and water or solid waste. And then only a very small amount actually goes into recycling and returns back into the economy. So that's the macro level. If we look at the meso level, we can see there are lots of different strategies under a circular economy to get these materials before they come from the environment to waste, which is at the bottom here. They can actually be sent back up the supply chain. What does that look like at the product level? Now I've put the supply chain on the side of the axis. In a linear economy, we move from materials, parts to product, and then rapidly come back down to waste, and then it stays there. And the lifetimes are very short. Whereas in a circular economy, the materials go to parts and products. They stay there longer due to repair and reuse. Then they might bounce back up and down the supply chain through remanufacture, recycling, and so forth. So the key principles of the circular economy are that we actually need to design out the waste and pollution. So that works by measuring where it happens and then looking at why it happens and then engaging in the design process and designing out that waste and pollution. Once we have those products in circulation, we need to keep those products and materials in use. That's where you start to see the loops. And then throughout, we need to think about regenerating natural systems. So there's ecosystems and the ecosystem services that underpin our economy. So I'm going to cover some of those business models that are being applied along the supply chain. Now, there's not enough space for all the loops here, but there can be loops between products and parts and service providers and products, etc. But the main idea is that we want to prevent the waste and emissions, and we want to prevent the emissions that are coming along the supply chain. So the highest value loops are the smallest ones. So here we're talking about creating products that are multifunctional, which actually increases the intensity of the use of that product. And then also making them more classic, which increase the number of years that they're considered valuable or in style. The second one is to maintain them well through proper cleaning and storage, particularly when it comes to clothes and food. And lastly, in that loop, is to repair or to adjust according to your changing style and shape. The latter is particularly for fashion. And you'll see that this loop that I'm talking about is really between one user and themselves. So the products are things like phones or items that you use regularly that you can't really share. Okay, once that's exhausted, we then move to the second loop, which moves from the user back through to a service provider and back to a different user. So the models there are the resell. So we're seeing a lot of growth in re-commerce at the moment, or rental, so product as a service rather than ownership. Also saves us a lot of trouble in storing or maintaining our products, or making it much easier or more efficient to donate. All right, but eventually the day comes when that product needs a bit of maintenance. So it really needs to go back to the product manufacturer or service or other providers that can operate at the product level. And so there we're talking about refurbish and remanufacture. The difference between that, refurbish means, for instance, if you have your phone, it means fixing it up so that it stays at the same level of that phone, or fixing a clothing item, but it remains at the level it was when it was first sold. Remanufacturing is a bit different because you can actually take parts out of particularly electronics and then move them into the next iteration of that product. So they're actually moving up to that next, to the most recent product. So that's called remanufacture. Huge opportunity, particularly in our region. And that's again a higher value loop. Then we come to the point where that product is now really rendered a set of materials, and we're losing the value added, especially that technical value addition that's come into it, particularly for phones or clothing. And that's when we start to recycle or downcycle. Big difference there. Recycling means that we're retaining the value of that material per kilogram, whereas downcycle means it becomes a lower value material, such as insulation or carpet base. But it still stays in the system. Now, once we've done those, we can also look at system-wide changes, starting with digitizing the physical. Now, we've seen that with music, so not many people are buying CDs these days. I did notice that they're still available, but most people are just streaming, so there is no physical component apart from the energy that's used to stream them. But now we're also seeing it with e-commerce, where the stores, the bricks and mortar, are becoming digitized. Down to here, designing out emissions. So creating clothes or electronics that switch to processes that are much cleaner and don't cause those emissions to begin with is also considered a circular strategy. And last of all, well, a lot of those finite materials that we're using by definition will not be available in a raw format. So we'll need to use the finite materials in a secondary supply chain, so from one of these loops, rather than hoping to dig them back up out of new mines that are getting harder and harder to find. We're moving to deep sea mining, we're moving to asteroid mining. So to me, that doesn't really sound like a great strategy. So where possible, it's better to switch to renewable materials while keeping in mind that we need to protect ecosystems. All right, so those are those strategies. So now I want to talk about how digital technologies can support them. I can't see chats, by the way, so maybe if someone can flag that if there's a question along the way, or if my voice has just become not understandable anymore. Oh, wait, first of all, I would like to highlight supply chain cooperation. So looking at this, you can see that it's really not easy for one particular sector to work in isolation if they're going to have to um, exchange new materials with others in the supply chain. So there does need to be some cooperation. So there's two types here. One is between elements of the supply chain, because if you are introducing a more reusable product, or you're designing a product that can be recycled, you're very dependent on the right collection and sorting ecosystems being in place. You're dependent on government policies, and you're dependent on willing customers. I'm seeing there's a lot of problems with new circular businesses. For instance, in the coffee cup rental, you need customers to be on board with that, or switching to clothing rental, or clothing resale. So I think that there's a real role for ASCI and others to come in and facilitate those discussions. Second of all, sector cooperation within the sector. In some areas, there's new sectors being created, like in re-commerce. And so it's actually worthwhile for pre-competitive cooperation to take place so that you can agree on standards. Also thinking here about recyclable or compostable materials, just having standards so that on efficiency standards. France is introducing, for instance, lifespan product lifespan declarations, and so forth. So it might be useful for companies within a sector to get together and come to a common stance on that before they engage with policy. Also, there's R&D, particularly engagement with universities, and also some sectors are needing to have common forms of environmental assessment. So if you're comparing your products, you'd like to be on sort of equal footing, make sure that the same metrics are being used. All right, now is the digital part. So there are lots of different kinds of digital innovations that are coming up in this industry 4.0, or this digital transformation that's happening. Some of them are digital. So I'd say the key ones that are coming up are artificial intelligence and blockchain, but there are different subcategories. Internet of Things, sort of digitizing our products and making better use of mobile devices, like with m-commerce or m-learning. But there's also physical innovations. So we're seeing 3D printing. That's still at in very nascent levels. It's got huge potential, especially now. I've noticed shipping is extremely expensive. Would be great if we could just send over those digital plans and 3D print things from whatever material they're made of here. Robotics as well, getting quite advanced. And then also physical markers. I'll get into that in a moment. There's also a lot of biological innovation, so bio-based materials, DNA marking, etc. Probably won't go into that one too much today. So they actually come in at different points of the circular economy. So again, I've got the supply chain here in a different format, just to make things fun again. So let's say this is the loop of product design going to sourcing, manufacturing, marketing, sales, distribution. And then here we get to that use, reuse, sharing, repair, where we want to see those loops taking place. Eventually, though, things will enter into end-of-life management. We call it that rather than waste management, where we need to collect things, and there needs to be good reverse logistics. Then they need to be sorted into the right categories, pre-processed. Finally, they need to be recycled. And then they need to cross this little bridge here to get back into product design. And they don't, for a variety of reasons. So we can unlock those reasons or overcome those reasons with digital technologies. I think the most fundamental one is that we can't have circular systems if everything is not really transparent. We lose sight of things once they go out into the world. So what we want is to enable transparency of material flows through what they call an Internet of Materials. So mimicking this physical flow, we need a digital flow, which you can see in the middle. And so this Internet of Materials can be enabled by giving products a cryptographic anchor and storing information about those products on the blockchain. Then we come to the first part of this, that's point two here, but the start of the supply chain is when we're designing products. We need to design durable products and materials, not only durable, but reprocessable. So when you're building cars, for instance, that are designed to be shared, they're made out of more durable materials than cars that are designed for single use. Same goes for coffee cups, bikes, etc. So you can use artificial intelligence and machine learning in the material engineering. So one example is the European Space Agency. They're using machine learning to refine a smaller set of alloy concentrations for the materials that they're using, so that they can be both lightweight, durable, etc., but that those alloys can be ultra recyclable at the end of the chain. So they go from having about 10,000 different formulations to a couple of hundred, which can then go into physical testing. Then when it comes to the reuse, extended lifespan, sharing, repair, it's very handy to have connected reusable products. So digitizing those products that we own so that we can get a little signal, or we can easily connect to other data systems to learn how to share, upcycle, or properly dispose, but I don't mean dispose, but end of life management of those products. So again, we need Internet of Things. We probably need some cryptographic anchors or digital signatures. Down here, getting all that stuff out of our drawers and garages. I'm sure many of you have overstuffed garages full of latent value. We need to optimize collection and reverse logistics. So that can be done through tokenized reward systems based on blockchain and through your mobile devices. So they really need to be mobile-based platforms. Then it's also handy to have a virtual waste management platform. We call this a sort of a Tinder for recycling, so that you can find the materials that sort of suit your criteria, whatever they might be. And also there have been uses of machine learning and artificial intelligence to give you a good idea of the ideal price of that material you're sending back out into the world. Then the fun part, when we get to sorting and pre-processing. So we need hyper-intelligent sorting. This is where some of those physical technologies come in, such as the robotics, to replace the human labor. There are some discussions about protecting jobs, especially for low-skilled workers, but we need to balance that between protecting jobs and what we consider decent work for the future. So sorting waste may be something that we feel is not decent work in the future, and where we want to use robotics. And those robots do need machine vision to understand what they're sorting. But the products also need to have a visual signature to enable that sorting. So that's where we come to this sort of UV or IR spectroscopy, or those cryptographic anchors that can be read by machines. So that's where we are. Okay, I'll try to move through some examples. So I wanted to start with the digital product passport, which is coming in the European Union. Now, we do have product passports out there in the world, particularly in fashion, in jeans. So a lot of jeans have actually got a digital passport that you can scan and learn a bit about the product. I've also seen things like coffee that you can scan, and then you can get the Google Map locations of where it was produced and a bit of info about that supply chain. But largely, the product information looks like this right now in a linear economy. The product information is confidential and we're not able to see it. It's also non-standardized, so it's very difficult for the distributor to even know where those components came from. And once it goes to the consumer, a lot of that information is just lost altogether. So the consumer's not sitting there sort of scanning things yet. So the idea of the digital product passport is that it would be a structured collection of product-related data with a predefined scope and agreed data ownership and access rights, and that would be conveyed through a unique identifier. The system would be a decentralized system linked with the European data space for smart circular applications. So this is particularly there to underpin circular economy and to overcome this transparency flows. And what kind of information? Well, it would be information related to sustainability, circularity, value retention, and it would be there to facilitate reuse, remanufacturing, and recycling. It's very important that this has come from very visionary policy from the European Parliament. I won't read this out in detail, but they've asked for digital product passports to provide reliable, transparent, and easily accessible information about the durability of the product and its maintenance, reuse, repair, dismantling possibilities, end-of-life handling, as well as composition in terms of materials and the chemicals that have been used and their environmental and other impacts. There's a little hint there that we also, this could be a precursor to eventual carbon pricing. We do need to record that supply chain information so that we can support carbon pricing when it does come about. Yeah. So we can make there's many cases of it. Yeah, why would you bother doing all this? Well, we want to track the raw material extraction production. So we want to know when that mining is happening, what was that mining for, which consumers, which markets, who got the value addition from those raw materials. We also want manufacturers to create digital twins. Yeah, so, and we also want to track the life story about the product. Yeah, I think I've probably covered most of this already, but it would also enable more sustainable consumption by citizens themselves. All right, now going to another example of a very vertically integrated company, which is Apple. So in very small font here, it says, ultimately, we want to make products using only renewable resources or recycled materials. And we want to return an equivalent amount of material to the market to be used by us or others. So they're taking this extended producer responsibility on both ends. They're not going to use those raw materials that I showed in the future, in the past. So they're going to only access them from those loops. But they're also going to ensure that for every kilogram of materials they've put out there, they've enabled the collection and sorting and return of products coming back. Now, because they're vertically integrated, they have that supply chain coordination, so they can manufacture products with the kinds of materials and components and assembly that would enable their robots, their disassembly robots, to disassemble them efficiently. So this here, we can see the claw. This is Daisy, their recycling robots, and she can apparently she can disassemble 200 mobile phones in 1 hour, but only because the phone's been designed for that. Another type of technology I'm talking about, Internet of Things here to enable reuse. This is one of my favorite circular economy businesses called Cup Club. Currently only in the UK, they're expanding into the US and Hong Kong, but they're amazing. It's basically coffee cup as a service to overcome that waste that's from our addiction to takeaway coffee. I love my takeaway coffee. Basically, they mimic the disposable experience for the user, but that coffee cup has a little chip in it that's connected to your mobile phone, and it gives you a little ping to return it to any different cafe that's using the system or specially designated bins. And then Cup Club handles the washing to HACCP standards, so they're very hygienic. And here they're shifting labour away from collecting our trash, our coffee cup trash, which people have to do as a job, and they're shifting that type of labour to very decent labour inside their washing warehouses, which is a very clean job in a very secure, warm environment. I can go on about the pricing behind this is kind of interesting, but they're trying to compete in price with the disposable cups and still make it price neutral for the consumer. Another one I like, Terracycle, they're active in Australia. They use very good digital technology for their reverse logistics. Then they recycle the unrecyclables, you know, the toothpaste tubes, the cigarette butts. They also claim they can recycle dirty nappies and tampons. So quite interesting what they can do. But and they do that with some really good logistics, but they also want to put themselves out of business. So they're getting into the e-commerce sector in groceries. So what they're doing is they formed a company called Loop, which is getting into our increasing interest in home delivered groceries. Advantage being is that you have the reverse logistics already built in, because this guy delivering to this woman, I mentioned earlier to Monique, this is a very gendered picture here. So, but anyway, we've got a woman picking up the groceries and a man delivery. So not only can this box be reused and returned the next time he comes to drop it off, but also the products themselves can use reusable materials, and then Terracycle can also provide that service of washing. So, so I'll stop there. Just want to say thank you. Here's my little nod to generation restoration. I love ecosystems because I love fruit. This is me in Hokkaido enjoying a Japanese melon. So I'd like to thank you all for bearing with my voice and letting me be here. And I'll hand back over to Brendan. Thank you.
So at this point, it'd be, thank you so much, Janet. That was awesome. And particularly given you've been struggling with your voice, you did a tremendous job. So now I'd love to invite Nicole to present, and look forward to your presentation, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay, so this does that show you the slides? Can you see that?
Yes, Nicole, it's all visible. Thanks.
Great, excellent, thank you. Well, good afternoon. And look, I just want to reiterate what Janet was saying. I feel so privileged to be able to be here. And so thanks to Monique and the team for inviting Planet Ark to contribute to this afternoon's webinar. So my name's Dr Nicole Garofano. As Arushi mentioned, I am representing Planet Ark and the Australian Circular Economy Hub, or the ACE Hub, as we like to call it. I am the still recently new head of circular economy development. So I'm 5 weeks into my role, and I'm feeling very honoured to be here and speaking with you. But before I get into my presentation, I just wanted to share a quick story of my journey to realising the value of a circular economy. So over the last 17 years, I've engaged with community waste management projects. I have been undertaking some academic work and so on, but it all started with a holiday that I was fortunate to have in 2004, where I spent 3 months in Barbados in the Caribbean. So spending 3 months there, I had a month of usual sort of island holiday experience, but then I realised I wanted to do something more, and so I started volunteering with the local environmental organisation. Cutting the long story short, that couple of months turned into an 8-year post with that organisation as the director. And we engage with lots of different sectors, and including waste, as I mentioned. But in 2012, I returned to Australia and started some academic study, which led me to a PhD. And that PhD, I mapped the value chain of plastic food and beverage packaging material, specifically for small island developing states. And of course, in this experience, the findings showed the economies of scale were an issue, and logistics, both big challenges, which not unlike our regional areas here in Australia. But the research revealed also to me this complexity of global trade. It showed what I call a vanishing value of packaging, and that we need to have localized approaches to generating and managing products, but also considering that large global trading platform. my research really reinforced this need for value to be considered across all steps and all actors in the chain. And I realized that transitioning to a circular economy, it really encourages us to recognize how value can be attributed at each step in the chain. It recognizes that complexity, but it still supports long-term resilience, both for organizations, but also, on a much broader planetary perspective. So that's just so I realized this value, and that's where the circular economy started to be unveiled to me. And so today I'll just speak a little bit about reiterate some of the points that Janet was making, and also to introduce you to Planet Ark and our Circular Economy Hub. So I'll start with a little refresher on what Planet Ark is. So we were established in 1992, almost 30 years. We've been the leading environmental behaviour change organisation in Australia since that time. And businesses in the audience might be aware of our business recycling program, which is an online database for small to medium businesses looking for recycling solutions. Thankfully, we received support from the New South Wales EPA for that program, so we're very grateful for that. For others, you may have interacted with our program called Recycling Near You, which provides our one-stop shop for curbside and drop-off recycling information. It also facilitates reduction of material consumption, but also reducing what ends up in our landfill. And both of these are really important services, and they're examples of how we work with businesses, governments and schools and the community to improve environmental outcomes. And so these are now being complemented by our latest initiative, which is the Australian Circular Economy Hub. And through the ACE Hub, we are adopting what we call a transition broker role, which is facilitating this transition to an Australian circular economy that fits in with this global dialogue of policy and action that are currently underway. But we want to ensure that we engage with all sectors as we go along, and so hence we're very grateful to be here with you today. So I want to start, following on from Janet's excellent introduction to the circular economy there. I just wanted to recap these few points, and starting with this statement. So in my experience working with Pacific Island nations in my PhD and in other work, traditional practices reflect the reality that in nature there's actually no such thing as waste. And so, in fact, in traditional languages in the Pacific, there was no word for waste or garbage or trash. It's really only appeared since the introduction of our modern economy to these communities. So in transitioning to a circular economy, I think we really need to revisit and re-embrace this principle that everything around us can in fact be resources that can be transformed. And so, through the very outset in design, this can be achieved. And again, by doing so, we can reduce material consumption, leakage into the environment, but also reduce climate change and regenerate our natural systems. And so we believe that our current economic model has really presented many resource challenges, and that the model is really unsustainable. We need to change how we're functioning. Our vision at the ACE Hub is that we have in Australia a flourishing economy, society and environment. And, to achieve this vision, we need to not just recognise but engage the three principles that Janet was introducing us to earlier. We know that there are many definitions of the circular economy. In fact, Deloitte's have suggested there's at least 114 definitions of the circular economy. But one thing that is commonly agreed are these principles. And so where many believe that, that recycling is potentially the circular economy, it's actually only a tool to achieve a circular economy. And it's really critical in addressing principle 2, which is, keeping products and materials in use for longer, reducing the amount of products that go to landfill. But resource recovery and recycling are not the full extent, as I said, and looking back to principle 1 around designing the design phase of products, it really reduces not only the waste, but material extraction. And certainly there are other opportunities as well to regenerate natural systems in how we design products. And so in supply chains, Janet gave some excellent examples there, but the circular economy can manifest as designing out waste and pollution from improved efficiencies in your warehousing space, considering renewable energy microgrids for electricity supply, which again, as Janet mentioned, might include collaborating with your neighbouring organisation and tenants, reusing parts and materials to maximise raw material value, or considering waste as a resource to other supply chain steps, and potentially creating new income streams from waste or resources, as we like to call them. And so there are many benefits. Globally, business leaders are recognising that there are clear benefits, and some of these are listed here. But to highlight a couple, in terms of job creation, if we look at Principle 2, keeping products and materials in use through recycling, in Australia, recycling offers 9 jobs per 10,000 tonnes of waste, and that's in comparison to 2.8 jobs if those same tonnes were landfilled. There's a real benefit in recycling as one tool of the circular economy. And in relation to economic growth, PwC suggests that a financial benefit of $1.8 trillion is available in the Australian economy over a 20-year period, should we adopt circular economy. And so, there's another perspective to this, that we're looking at another benefit of adopting a circular economy is, it's reducing risk across supply chains. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development suggests that circular economy can actually be driven by risk. And certainly we've seen with COVID over the last 15 months that resource supply and supply chain disruptions are central to this concept. Commodity prices are fluctuating. We've got reputational risk from a public that is becoming even more aware and very vocal of the need for products to be more sustainable. So adopting a circular economy really asks us to reconsider our supply chains and where efficiencies can be made, and not just for the immediate economic gain, but also for the longevity of global trade for the future. And so this brings us to the Australian Circular Economy Hub, which is, as I mentioned, our Planet Ark's latest major initiative. And to start with, I just want to share a quick couple of snapshots of data that we've generated over the last 18 months or so. In our 2020 survey of senior decision makers in Australia, 88% of the business leaders believe that the circular economy will be important to the future of their business. But, they also recognise that there's going to be barriers, and businesses identified these are the top 5 barriers, including lack of knowledge, which is second on the priority list behind finance. And this is where really the ACE Hub comes in. So in that same survey, businesses said that they're really seeking a trusted, easy to use, centralised knowledge hub that facilitates this transition to a circular economy. And that's really the mission of the ACE Hub. Our goal is to really support industry in Australia by providing examples of circular economy adoption so that they can be shared across many sectors. So the ACE Hub is really, it's a platform, it's a knowledge bank, a collaboration hub that will facilitate this transition. And it's live now on our website. You can see the website there. We're adding to it every day though. There's lots more still to be added. And the way we're doing this is to develop we've developed a working diagram of the circular economy approach to business. And this graphic here is actually on our website. It's a very interactive, when you see it on the website, you can click on some of these little areas here on the slide, which can give you some links to some excellent case studies of these first movers, best in class, if you like, of CE in Australia. So one example taken from the reuse section of this graphic is, I've chosen this one here, the Key Quarter Tower. I realise it's not a supply chain example, but I feel like it's a really useful example to show the full circle and really engages with all the 3 principles of CE. So this building it's been designed from the start to reduce waste and pollution. That's really important, principle 1. Over 50% of the resources required for this really stunning new tower are being sourced as reused materials directly from the existing building. So they've saved 7,500 tonnes of CO2, again, by reusing the material as principle 2, and an estimated $130 million saved in comparison to a full demolition. So this is one example. We need supply chain examples. So if you guys have them, we'd really love to hear from you and develop those that we can promote for learnings for others. At the ACE Hub, we're working within 4 pillars, and I'll just run through a couple of these action areas that we're working on. So, for example, up here with Educate and Connect, we've started to develop the case studies, as I mentioned. We've also launched some webinars, and we've attracted over 1,000 attendees already to those. We're soon going to be launching our public-facing online collaboration space, so you can keep an eye out for that. And really importantly, we launched our advisory board just last month, and those folks are coming from a range of industries. And we've also got some working groups, which I'll speak about in a minute. So there's a lot of work that's already been done, but we're really excited that there's lots more to come. We couldn't be doing all of this, of course, without our partners and sponsors. And we've been busy, thanks to the Australian government, Bingo, Keep Cup, Planet Ark Power, and we've also got tremendous support from our technical supporters and collaboration partners. And we're really open to increasing the pool of partners and supporters. So, again, get in touch if you want to participate in that. This is a slide of our work plan. You can see here we've got a couple of color-coded. So the darker green are where industry can actively collaborate in some of those activities. And the lighter coloured ones are where we're really looking to support industry transition. And so the question then is, how can we, what's the next steps? How can we get involved? And so at the very least, we would ask you to subscribe to the ACE Hub. So you can go to the website and subscribe to keep updated on the information that we're sharing. We invite you to collaborate with us and potentially where you can to partner with us if that's possible. Specifically, opportunities for your members. I wanted to firstly highlight this concept of demand-driven procurement. And so at the ACE Hub, we recognise this as a really important key component to facilitate this transition to the circular economy. And so by this, we mean that circular economy is driven by demand. So, for example, in this photo, we see Coca-Cola products promoting at the top slide there, using 100% recycled content in PET bottles. So these bottles couldn't be made without recycled content. And so Coca-Cola is demanding the recycled content. And Return and Earn, interestingly, just on the left of image, is facilitating the recovery of the materials to satisfy that demand. So procurement can engage, officers can engage with Return and Earn and the processing partners to deliver the recycled content to make those materials, make those bottles. So the bottle is designed for recycling in the first instance, but nobody would buy the product back if there were no recycled content bottles. So the recycled content is, demanded from Coca-Cola. So same could be said if government said that tomorrow, we're going to be spending $150 million on procurement, that we want to be circular. And if we consider how that would drive the adoption of circular principles in our supply chain. So circular procurement can really stimulate that demand for services and goods which deliver to the circular economy. And then, the procurement professionals in your grouping, your institute, you guys are really one of the most important enablers of the circular economy. And so to recognise the importance of your contribution, we're also collaborating with your extensive experience. We're working with the Institute to have membership on our procurement working group. And this is going to be made up of, or it is being made up of, procurement professionals, consultants, policymakers at all levels. And this working group will be operational by the end of the month. Within that, we'll also have subcommittees. So if there's specific elements we want to focus on, we can adopt those as well. And as I mentioned, we're looking at case studies or exemplars of circular economy. So again, within your networks, this would be great to have some of your contribution here, where businesses are adopting the 3 principles, to the way that they do business. We're also looking at our collaboration portal, and we're hosting webinars as well on our platform. So if there are some topics that we can collaborate with your members to highlight that. I mentioned the collaboration portal. And we've also got a business survey, and we'd invite you, if you're interested, to participate in that business survey. So there's lots of ways to get involved, and certainly it's about you getting involved with us as much as we want to be involved with you and to share your stories and highlight the excellent work that's being done by the membership. So I just want to have a second last slide here, and just to say that these are the words of the late Pete Seeger in a 2008 song. I really think that these words really capture the essence of the circular economy. And it's something that we can all sort of aspire to, I guess, that we can adopt as we move forward into a really changed economic model around, how we value the sharing economy, how we value products, that we can maintain things to be, kept in use for longer, and the great examples that Janet provided earlier. And so I think, from our perspective, our Planet Ark CEO, he sees this as one of the most significant collaboration efforts that are ever needed to be undertaken to adopt and really embrace the circular economy. And I think that as we're all looking for ways to build back better, that we can have our team at Planet Ark and the Circular Economy Hub help you guys, and together we can partner to achieve this circular economy for Australia, but also for our partners in other countries, and